Alright, this is Deuteronomy chapter 2. But before I get into chapter 2, I'm going to give a little refresher on chapter 1. So basically, Moses began his speech to the new generation of the Israelites about to enter into the promised land, basically describing their history so far, them leaving Mount Sinai and going to Kadesh Barnea. Well, before this, he had the wise men appointed to help judge the people, and then they went to Kadesh Barnea, and then the 12 spies get sent out, and then they come back and give that report of the land. And then 10 of the spies, they don't want to go in because of the giants there, the Anakim, and then the people don't want to go in either because ultimately they don't believe the Lord, that the Lord will give them the land as he promised. But Joshua and Caleb believed, and so they would get to go in with the new generation. And then Moses also said that he too would not get to go in. In verse 37, he was angry with me, the Lord, for your sakes, even saying, even you shall not go in. And then, the people grieved over their sin, but then they decided to go in themselves, but the Lord would not be with them, and they would get pushed back by the Amorites. So they were sorry, but it was too late. They already did not believe, and God said, you're not going in for those 38 to 40 years. So, all right, well, one other thing before I depart from chapter 1. When I was looking at the Enduring Word commentary the other night on this chapter, I noticed something in verse 19 when it says that they departed from Mount Horeb or Mount Sinai. In the New Testament, Mount Sinai is used as a symbol, basically to symbolize like the Old Covenant and the law, which Deuteronomy is of that law. I mean, it's a Deuteronomy, a repeating of the law, second law, just repeating the law a second time. So, but Mount Sinai is like a picture of the law and the Old Covenant, really to show us the need for our Savior and to give us the knowledge of sin, which is actually the main purpose for the law. And then ultimately, once we come to that realization of our sin and our need for a Savior, then we can leave Mount Sinai and come to Jesus, and he will lead us into our promised land. And so Moses, the lawgiver, he gives us the law for us to see our sin and to see our need for Christ, and then Joshua will step up as the leader to lead the people into the promised land, just as Jesus leads his people into the ultimate promised land. And by the way, Joshua is the same name for Jesus. It's the same Hebrew word, where Yeshua, I think, for Joshua, and that's also where you get the word Jesus. So, isn't that interesting? Coincidence? I think not. But I just wanted to throw that in there because I didn't think about that before. I didn't think about that going through chapter 1. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Alright, now moving on to chapter 2. Let me go ahead and read it, and then I'll go through the notes. Then we turned and journeyed into the wilderness of the way of the Red Sea, as the Lord spoke to me. And we skirted Mount Seir for many days. And the Lord spoke to me, saying, You have skirted this mountain long enough. Turn northward, and command the people, saying, You are about to pass through the territory of your brethren, the descendants of Esau, who live in Seir, and they will be afraid of you. Therefore watch yourselves carefully. Do not meddle with them, for I will not give you any of their land, no, not so much as one footstep, because I have given Mount Seir to Esau as a possession. And you shall buy food from them with money, that you may eat, and you shall also buy water from them with money, that you may drink. For the Lord your God has blessed you in all the work of your hand, and he knows your trudging through this great wilderness. These 40 years the Lord your God has been with you, you have lacked nothing. And when we passed beyond our brethren, the descendants of Esau, who dwell in Seir, away from the road of the plain, away from Elath and Ezon Geber, we turned and passed by the way of the wilderness of Moab. And then the Lord said to me, Do not harass Moab, nor contend with them in battle, for I will not give you any of their land as a possession, because I have given Ar to the descendants of Lot as a possession. The Eim have dwelt there in times past, a people as great and numerous and as tall as the Anakim, and they were also regarded as giants like the Anakim, but the Moabites called them Emim. I think that's how you say it, I don't know. And then the Horites formerly dwelt in Seir, but the descendants of Esau depossessed them, and they destroyed them before them, and dwelt in their place, just as Israel did to the land of their possession, which the Lord gave them. And now rise and cross over the valley of the Zedred. So we crossed over the valley of the Zedred, and at the time we took to come from Kadesh Barnea until we crossed over the valley of the Zered was 38 years, until all the generation of the men of war was consumed from the midst of the camp, just as the Lord had sworn to them. For indeed the hand of the Lord was against them to destroy them from the midst of the camp until they were consumed. So it was, when all the men of war had finally perished from among the people, that the Lord spoke to me, saying, This is the day you are to cross over at Ar, the boundary of Moab. And when you come near to the people of Ammon, do not harass them or meddle with them, for I will not give you any of the land of the people of Ammon as a possession, because I have given it to the descendants of Lot as a possession. That was also regarded as a land of giants. Giants formerly dwelt there, but the Ammonites called them Zamzumim. I think that might be how you say it, I don't know. The people as great and numerous and tall as the Anakim, but the Lord destroyed them before them, and they depossessed and dwelt in their place, just as he had done for the descendants of Esau who dwelt in Seir, when he destroyed the Horites from before them. And they depossessed them and dwelt in their place even to this day. And the Avim who dwelt in the villages as far as Gaza, the Kephtorim who came from Caphtor, destroyed them and dwelt in their place. Rise, take your journey and cross over the river Arnon. Look, I have given into your hand Sihon the Amorite, king of Heshbon, and his land. Begin to possess it and engage him in battle. This day I will begin to put the dread and fear of you upon the nations under the whole heaven, who shall hear the report of you, and shall tremble and be in anguish because of you. And I sent messengers from the wilderness of Kedemoth to Sihon, king of Heshbon, with words of peace, saying, Let me pass through your land, and I will keep strictly to the road, and I will turn neither to the right nor to the left. You shall sell me food for money, that I may eat, and give me water for money, that I may drink. Only let me pass through on foot, just as the descendants of Esau, who dwell in the land of Seir, and the Moabites who dwell in Ar, did for me, until I cross the Jordan to the land which the Lord our God is giving us. But Sihon, the king of Heshbon, would not let us pass through, for the Lord your God hardened his heart, and made his heart obstinate, that he might deliver him into your hand, as it is this day. And the Lord said to me, See, I have begun to give Sihon and his land over to you. Begin to possess it, that you may inherit his land. And then Sihon and all of his people came out against us to fight at Jahaz. And so the Lord our God delivered him over to us. And so we defeated him and his sons and all of his people. And we took all of his cities at that time, and we utterly destroyed the men and the women and the little ones of every city. We left none remaining. And we took only the livestock as plunder for ourselves, with the spoils of the cities which we took from Aroer, which is on the bank of the river Arnon, and from the city that is in the ravine as far as Gilead. There was not one city too strong for us. The Lord our God delivered all to us. Only you did not go near the land of the people of Ammon, anywhere along the river Jabbok, or to the cities of the mountains, or wherever the Lord our God has forbidden us. And that is chapter 2. Alright, now let me take a look at the notes. And that'll be the end for the MacArthur video here. Okay, so really this is actually describing the background of Numbers 20 and 21. But I'm not going to go there and read those accounts, but this is basically talking about those accounts. So basically, Moses is still given the history that has been experienced so far. But the first 23 verses here are dealing with Israel's relatives, the Edomites, the Moabites, and the Ammonites. Now, after spending a long time at Kadesh, the Israelites set out once again at the command of the Lord through Moses, and they traveled away from the promised land in a southeasterly direction from Kadesh towards the Gulf of Aqaba on the road to the Red Sea, and thus began the wanderings that were about to end. And then Israel spent many days wandering in the vicinity of Mount Seir, which was the mountain range of Edom, south of the Dead Sea, and extending down the eastern flank of the Arabah. Alright. And then they skirted the mountain long enough, and they began to turn north. The departure from Kadesh had been in a southeasterly direction away from the promised land until the Lord commanded Israel to turn again northward into the direction of the promised land. So basically they were going south for a little while, and then the Lord would tell them to turn back north. And then as they were turning back north, they were going to pass through the territory of the descendants of Esau. Now Esau was the brother of Jacob. The Edomites, the descendants of Esau, lived in Mount Seir. And according to Numbers 20:14 through 21, the Edomites refused to allow the Israelites to pass through their land. And verse 8 is reflecting this refusal. And it also states that the Edomites went around the border of the descendants of Esau, so they went to the east of their territory. And also they were not allowed to go and fight against the Edomites. So, but Edom was just I think I read in the commentary that enduring word that Edom was like a nickname for Esau, but eventually that's what his descendants would be known as, the Edomites. And then that area that they were living in, where I think that would be kind of in like southern Jordan today, or like northwestern Saudi Arabia, kind of that area towards the Sinai Peninsula. That's around this. This is kind of in that area, sort of, or close to it. But eventually, that area where the Edomites were living, this would be known as the nation of Edom, but here it's referred to as Seir because you have that mountain region, Seir. So, but anyway, they went around the territory. So, and God granted the descendants of Esau an inheritance. Mount Seir was their possession. In verse 9, the same thing is said about the Moabites. In verse 19, the same thing is said about the Ammonites. Alright. But then they passed beyond the descendants of Esau, and then they went away from the road of the plain. I think referring to the mountains, maybe. So, and then they went away from Elath and Ezon Geber. Now these two towns located just north of the Gulf of Aqaba. Israel passed to the east of Edom and to the east of Moab on their journey northward. So they passed these towns. And so as they were passing these towns, they would pass by the way of the wilderness of Moab. God would tell them not to go fight against Moab either. Yep, and he gave that land to them, and I guess this land, and it refers to this land that the Moabites were living in called Ar, A-R. So, and you had these people who dwelt there called the Emim or Emim. Now apparently this was a Moabite term meaning terrible ones. This people, numerous and tall, were the pre-Moabite occupants of the land of Moab. So these giants who used to live in this land that the Moabites live in now, they were deep as, these people were taken out. So, and then also they have these group of people called the Horites. They formerly dwelt in Seir, where the Edomites were now at this time, but the Edomites depossessed that land and they destroyed the Horites. So, and then I guess you could say the Emim were and I guess the Emim were taken out by the Moabites, and then the Moabites possessed that land. Yeah. Now the Horites were yeah, Hurrians, a people who lived in various places around in Syria and Palestine. And these people, those living in the region of Seir, were displaced by the descendants of Esau. The displacement of the Horites by the Edomites was an analogy to the Israelites' possession of their own land. That they too would uh, yeah, take out people living in their land. Yeah, the Anakim, the giants that were in the promised land. Yeah, that, the 10 spies were afraid of. Like, yeah, we got no chance. You got the Anakim there. So, which I know in the book of Joshua, Anakim are taken out. So, now arise and cross over into the valley of Zered. Now this was a brook that ran into the Dead Sea from the southeast. It seems to have constituted the southern boundary of Moab. In contrast to the disobedience associated with Kadesh, the people obeyed the command to cross over the brook Zered, and this was a new spirit of obedience toward the Lord among the people. Yep, you got this, yeah, so, yeah, where they disobeyed and not going into the promised land, and now they're obeying here when they're moving around in the wilderness. So, okay, what was the next part? Verse 14. Yep, and then it took them 38 years to get from Kadesh Barnea to the valley of the Zered. So, and these were the years. Now, yeah, this was the wilderness wandering years. 38 years from the failure at Kadesh to the obedience at Zered. And it was during this time that the rebellious generation who had been denied access to the promised land by the oath of the Lord had all died. So pretty much at this time, basically when those 38 years, 40 years are almost up, pretty much that old generation that came out of Egypt had died in the wilderness, and you have this new generation who are actually obeying the Lord. And then you get to people of Ammon, and when they get to the people of Ammon, they're not supposed to harass them either. The Lord also gave the land of the Ammonites as a possession to the descendants of Lot. Yeah, now the Ammonites and the Moabites, they were both descendants of Lot. After Lot and his 2 daughters were rescued from Sodom and Gomorrah in Genesis 19, and then unfortunately his wife looked back and became a pillar of salt. Yeah, and then Lot and his 2 daughters were rescued and they came to safety. But then the daughters do commit sin by sleeping with their dad, and through that you end up getting the nations of Moab and Ammon from the sons that are born from those 2 daughters. So, and I guess really as a consequence of that sin, Moab and Ammon would become some of Israel's Moab and Ammon would be some of Israel's enemies. So, yep, sin has consequences even in the future. Alright, well anyway, but you had also the giants in that land before the Ammonites possessed it, called the Zumim. And then the Lord destroyed them before the Ammonites, and then they depossessed them and dwelt in their place. So basically all these former people in these other lands that they are, passing by, the lands of their relatives. Basically, you had these other giants living there, and they got driven out, well, by God ultimately, and then these relative nations would possess the land. So, alright, but those giants were destroyed by the Lord, and the land was given to the Ammonites, and this was also to serve as an encouragement that to the Israelites that God could defeat the Anakim in the land of Canaan and give that land to Israel too. So yeah, if God defeated the giants in these lands, then surely he can defeat them in the promised land. And yeah, and giants were defeated. It was in Joshua. So but anyway, that Zumim, that was an Ammonite term to describe those people who lived in the land, and they were characterized as being as tall as the Anakim. Alright, and then moving on. But I guess you can say that you have some of this there to encourage the new generation of Israelites to take the land, really to bolster faith in the new generation. Yeah, unlike the old generation who, wondered and died since they chose to not have faith. Yep. And then you get to these people called the Avim. They dwelt in villages as far as Gaza. So in southwestern Palestine along the Mediterranean coast. And then you got the Caphtorim or Caphtorim. Now, Caphtor or Caphtor probably refers to Crete, or it may be a reference to an early Philistine group from that island who invaded the coast of Palestine, and they defeated the Avim, and then they dwelt there. And these, Caphtorim were the precursors to the later greater Philistine invasion of around 1200 BC. So eventually the Philistines would come. And the Philistines would be one of Israel's greatest enemies. And then the giant Goliath is the most famous Philistine. Alright. And then this historical re-explaining continues, detailing the defeat of the two Amorite kings, Sihon and Og, and the takeover of their territory. But here in this chapter you have Sihon. So, they wanted to get through the land, peacefully. Yeah, they wanted to get through the land. They're not going to do anything they shouldn't do. Yeah, you can sell me food for money. You can give me water for money, but just let me pass through. So then as they were coming to the Amorites, they would get to that northern boundary of Moab, the river Arnon, where Israel was allowed to attack Sihon the Amorite, because the Amorites were not relatives of Israel. Ah, so that's why the Lord would allow them to attack. Yeah, because these others, Edom, Moab, and Ammon, were relatives of Israel. And God promised to give that land to them as those lands to them as inheritances. So, but God would allow the people to take out Sihon. Now, they wanted to get through the land, peacefully, just let us to pass through. Just let us pass through. But the king would not let them pass through. And God hardened his heart. Yeah, that he might deliver him into your hand. Now, the hardened his spirit, or whatever, heart, whatever, Sihon, by his own conscious will, refused Israel's request to journey through his land. And God confirmed what was already in Sihon's heart, namely arrogance against the Lord and his people, so that he might defeat him in battle and give him his land to Israel. So the Lord already knew that the king wasn't going to do this. So, and I think since he knew that the king ultimately was going to refuse to let him through, that's when the Lord hardened his spirit. So, and then, let the people, defeat him. Yeah, so. Alright. And then they had the battle at Jahaz, and the Israelites, the Lord through Israel defeated Sihon and the Amorites, and they didn't leave the people alive in every city, and then they took livestock as plunder and spoils of the city from Arir, however you say that, on the bank of the river, Arnon, I guess which was the northern border of Moab. So I guess you can say that this region was kind of in the north area, maybe close to Syria area, and also as far as Gilead, which is kind of around, I think, the Syria area. If I'm wrong, maybe Prager will correct me on the locations. But anyway, the Lord defeated these Amorites. But they weren't allowed to possess these other lands. So they could only possess what the Lord would allow them to possess. Alright, well, that's all the notes for chapter 2 in the MacArthur Study Bible. Alright, well, I guess I can move on to chapter 2 in the Prager Rational Bible. Alright, well, let's go check it out. I'll see you in the next one.